looked closely at this dog suddenly climbing on the bed, smelled the mistress' stomach. Then it began to bark wildly at the mistress. The owner told him to shut up, but it barked more and more fierce, until the owner gets angry. Jim would only stop. In response to Jim's unusual behavior, the mistress suddenly realized that something was wrong. She quickly took out a pregnancy test. It turned out that she was pregnant with a baby. The couple embraced each other with excitement, but then, the couple realized a serious problem. It turns out that the woman's favorite Jim is actually a stray dog. Since childhood, he was often bullied and chased by bear children, so whenever he saw a child, he would show anger and restlessness. The man was afraid that Jim's restlessness would scare the baby in his belly, so he proposed to sell Jim, but the female owner couldn't bear to let him be hurt by humans again. She was determined to keep him, so much so that, in the rest of his life, the male owner only loves the little black dog very much. He ignored Jim's existence. Jim was very unhappy with this. 9 months passed. The lady gave birth to the baby. The lady came up to him. She wanted Jim to meet her little master, but Jim couldn't accept the baby for a while. Can't help but scream. The baby cried out in fear. The owner was already upset with him. Directly shut him out of the door. The whole day without water and food. Jim looked at the house innocently. He did not know what he had done wrong. The woman asked to put Jim back inside, but the husband, for the safety of the baby, he refused without hesitation. Just as Jim was losing his mind, he turned his head and noticed the dog next door was playing happily with its owner. Seeing this warm and friendly scene, Jim seemed to know what he had to do. Late into the night, the baby's cries came over the intercom. The couple rushed to the nursery to check. When the two entered the room, but the baby stopped crying. It turned out that Jim was in front of the bed to soothe the baby. The man was still unsure about this. Once again, he locked it out of the door. Jim was lying on the floor in frustration. At that moment, his partner, Blackie, was hanging out in the house. Jim immediately reached out his paw and tapped the door. Blackie knew what he meant in a second. He skillfully ran over and opened the door. Let Jim sneak in quietly. Then he closed the door of the small room with understanding. Finally find a comfortable place to sleep. Jim, on the other hand, is outside the nursery. He never leaves the room. He is worried that his little master will cry again. Even though he was sleepy as hell, he still sat outside the door all night long, until the next morning when the couple went out. He looked at Jim incredulously. Then they went into the nursery to check. They found that the baby was still sleeping soundly. It seems Jim's vigilance was very effective, and with a little persuasion from the lady of the house, slowly the man stopped hating Jim so much. The couple kneeled on the floor with the baby in their arms, giving Jim a chance to get close to his little master. Jim slowly walked over to her. His chin rested on his little master, swore in his heart, seems to tell him he will protect his little master from now on. Woman changes the baby's diaper. The puppy is doing the work on the side. He drops the used diapers into the garbage. At night, he continues to squat next to the little master to put him to sleep. He won't leave until the adults are up. Jim is so worried about his little master. Not only does he have to make sure she eats her meals on time, he also had to clean up the leftovers she dropped under the table. She had just learned to walk. Jim has been watching over her every step of the way. He was afraid that she would fall down when going up and down the stairs. He also had to let his little master help her personally before she could do so. The little master is thus under Jim's care and attention. Soon she was old enough to go to school. At night, Jim would quietly do her homework with her. He would watch her study. When she encountered a problem she couldn't solve, Jim would bark anxiously and encourage her. And that's not all. Jim will not allow anyone to disturb her study, not even her family. In addition to studying, Jim is also always worried about his master's transportation. Every afternoon at 5 o'clock, he would take his leash and find the lady to remind her to pick up the children. And so, they walked home happily and happily. It was late at night in the middle of a thunderstorm. Jim was anxiously running back and forth in the living room, knocking on the door of the couple's room repeatedly. Finally, he woke up his mistress. He hurriedly took her to her daughter's room. It turned out that the little lady had a high fever. The doctor told them. Luckily, she was brought here in time. Otherwise, the daughter might have burned her brain cells. After she was discharged from the hospital, Jim will be by her side every day. Whenever she was uncomfortable, Jim would come up to her and observe her closely, and then report back to the adults. On this night, Mom put her daughter to bed. The daughter asked her mother worriedly. The teacher said that dogs only live for 10 years or so. She was afraid of losing her beloved dog. The mother told her daughter with relief, "If you take good care of your dog, he will always be by your side." Her daughter turned to Jim and asked, "Will you really stay with me forever?" Jim crawled onto the bed to comfort his little master. Then she fell asleep. A few months later, it was summer vacation for the little girl. The couple prepared to take their daughter on a trip. She said goodbye to Jim with reluctance. It was the first time in her life that she was separated from Jim, but it wasn't long before she left. Jim was on the edge of his seat at home. Blackie found the nanny. She asked her to open the door and let Jim out. The babysitter impatiently refused, but Jim here, always worried about the safety of the little master. So at night, when the nanny was not paying attention, Blackie helped Jim to sneak out, all the way to catch up with the direction of the little master. But I did not know that the first time Jim went away, he encountered the evil of the human heart. He was tricked into a car by a taxi driver. He was going to sell the dog meat. In the end, Jim took advantage of the car when people were not paying attention. He managed to get out of the car. After walking all night, Jim was already hungry. He couldn't walk anymore. Unexpectedly, two hooligans on the side of the road were after him again. One was luring him with food in front. The other one pretended to be calm and sneak up on him in the back. Finally, Simple Jim was tied to a tree by the bad guys. The two turned around and went to find the dog butcher. A young boy nearby witnessed the whole process. The good little boy came over to him, untied the rope, and let Jim go. Jim turned back to the boy and thanked him. Then he continued on his way to his master's direction. Finally, Jim smelled the owner's scent in a wooded area. It turned out that the girl was lost here alone. Jim followed the voice of the girl calling for help. He found the injured little master. Jim rushed forward to comfort her. The girl hugged Jim warmly. Finally, a sense of security in her heart. At that moment, the sky was unlucky. Suddenly it started to rain heavily. Jim rushed to take the girl into a cave for warmth. Jim was worried that she might catch a cold, so he lay on top of her to give her warmth. After the rain passed, Jim rushed to get his little master out of the woods, but the girl's clothes were soaked. She began to run an unconscious fever. She was even a little disoriented. She didn't see the hunting trap on the ground. Jim quickly ran in front of the girl. The little master escaped. A large tree blocked the girl's path. The girl was too short. The girl was too short to climb over it. The clever dog immediately looked for a gap along the tree, but the top of the tree was a cliff. There was no way to get through. Jim explored again in the opposite direction. It turned out that this end was blocked by a landslide, also impassable. Jim had no choice but to make a hole in the ground to dig a hole. Jim struggled to make a gap. He managed to get through, but the girl did not move. Jim anxiously jumped on the trunk of the tree. He found that the little master was unconscious. Jim was in a hurry. Just then he heard the girl's father call out. The dog rushed to the scene. The owner saw Jim, realized that the situation was not good. He followed Jim and hurried to the tree. He picked up his daughter and rushed to the hospital. He ran in a hurry. He didn't even notice the hunting mechanism under his feet. Just at this critical moment, Jim jumped up and down with all his strength. He pushed the man aside. The man successfully avoided the organ, but Jim was unfortunately hit by the machine. The master saw Jim lying on the ground. He rushed over to check. He found that Jim's leg had been pierced by a needle. Cannot even stand up. The man instantly fell into a deep dilemma because he could not take his daughter and dog at the same time. The strong Jim reminded him, take the little master to the doctor first. Then he lay there with severe pain, acting like it didn't hurt at all. The man told Jim to wait for him. Then he picked up his daughter and left for the hospital. When Jim saw his master leave safely, finally he couldn't hold on and passed out. When Jim woke up again, the master was running over with Blackie to save himself. But unfortunately, the vet said the trap steel needle was coated with poison. The dog would not live long. The man gently stroked Jim's head. Tears filled his eyes. Then the family was ready to give Jim. He walked quietly for the last time. At this point, Jim was already weak to the extreme. Even his favorite meat skewers, he had no appetite to eat either. Jim saw his master fall down. He subconsciously got up and tried to help, but he was no longer the old Jim. When the lady saw her, she fought back tears and said,
"Makasih ya Jun, udah jagain Karin. Kalau kamu mau pergi, kamu boleh pergi sekarang, Jun."
At the end of his life, Jim remembered the past. When he was a stray dog, he was taken in by his kind mistress. When the owner hated him, the owner would plead for him. When the baby was born, the mistress would introduce him to people. When the fear of children is removed, the mistress will give him the opportunity to get close to the baby. And it is the kindness of the adults. The dog will double the kindness to the girl. Dogs are the most loyal of animals. You give him a home, he will devote his life to this home. Finally, Jim took a reluctant look at his little master. Then he closed his eyes in peace. Jim's life has come to a successful end. Follow me. See you in the next issue.